Hi, everyone. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm here to talk with you about Vedic astrology. It's a system of astrology from India. It's also referred to as Jyotish. And we do this show every week in order to familiarize you with the placement of the planets in the sky and the sun and the moon and how it affects your lives directly and the lives of the world around us, of those in the world around us. Okay, sorry about that. If you want to contact me for a reading, you can call me at 508-525-0001 or text me at the same number, 508-525-0001. I know I've been promising certain co-presentations on this channel for a few months. Hopefully, I'll be getting around to that sometime next week. And I'm looking forward to it. It's always good to talk with fellow astrologers about what they see as opposed to what I just see. And also, it's good to get feedback. So that just reminds me, if you like this presentation, uh, please do click the subscribe button, click the like button, send me some feedback, and I'm happy to engage in conversation with you. Um, and just let's get rolling. Okay. All right. So also you can email me at garygomesg@gmail.com. I have an extensive background in Vedic astrology going back 30 plus years. You can find me on Facebook. Um, Other videos are on YouTube, and you can also find me on Instagram and a variety of other platforms. Also, I am working sporadically with Saptarishi astrology. So where so if anybody's interested in writing for Saptarishi, please contact me. Uh, or uh, or else, if you're an astrologer and you'd like to use this particular platform to talk about your experiences, please send me an email or a text. You already have the text address at 508-525-0001. My email address is Gary Gomes, G-A-R-Y-G-O-M-E-S, and the letter G at gmail.com. I apologize for the glare. It's a Saturday morning, November 4th. It's very bright at this time of day here, and I can't minimize the window glare. So I apologize. I'm going to find a way to fix that. All right. So, but again, you're going to be mostly looking at a chart, not at my face over the next few minutes. Okay. All right. So let's go to the chart. And we're going to go to it now, a chart. One second, my friends. And we're going to go to it now, a chart for New Bedford, because that's where I am. Oops. Didn't want to do that. Okay. So we have a now chart right now, and Venus has changed signs. Okay, so this is an important transit. It's no longer under the aspect of Saturn. Saturn is now direct. So that's a bit of a relief. So you'll start to see things that were delayed start to come due. Okay, so let's look at the chart sign by sign. and house by house and just give you an overall feeling of the astrological weather. So this is a South Indian chart. Let me just make sure that we're sharing it. I usually have to do this a couple of times. All right. And let's do it one more time, just to be sure. All right. So Saturn retrograde is kind of an interesting phenomenon because I'm trying to think of it in a way that explains itself or explains it a little bit to the person who's not used to astrology. Saturn, when retrograde, delays judgments on things. It delays decisions. And we've been seeing a lot of Saturn retrograde activity in terms of delays and obstructions, and it's been aspecting both Jupiter and Venus. So these are two really important aspects. Okay, so essentially, what happens when Saturn aspects Jupiter and Venus? Saturn destroys whatever it looks at. This is kind of like an old um, saw in Vedic astrology, where Shani is considered to be a very malefic planet, is considered to be a very destructive planet. This isn't to make people afraid if they have strong Saturns in their house, in their charts, but it's considered to be a really restrictive planet. And what we've been seeing lately, at least in terms of what I would call court judgments and things like that, and even judgments in the news, is what I would call a quick rush to judgment in various political trials and various political activities. So we can see certainly around the world a lot of what I would call questionable legal agreements or questionable legal decisions happening around the world. And it's not even that I'm necessarily opposed to the legal judgments that have been made or decisions that have been made. It's just that they've been extraordinarily destructive. Okay. If Saturn's direct, it can move forward and do things more properly or appropriately. So I think it's interesting that you saw certain judgments reversed almost overnight uh, at the appellate levels in court cases in the United States and even around the world. And you're also seeing certain judgments in terms of fairness being being essentially turned around. Now, that has nothing to do with the ultimate outcome of any trial or any activities which are underway right now. But I've seen at least a couple of cases in the news, and I won't get into specifics here because I'm trying to stay as apolitical as possible. Right now is the best time to stay apolitical because everybody's um, very sharp right now. They're very aggressive right now. So with the K2 Mars Mercury conjunction, that's what happens down here in Libra. And the sun is debilitated. So essentially, what you'll have is governments essentially trying to um, make decisions for us. And I think one of the things that one of the things which is a core belief system that I have is that people have a right to make up their own minds about what they see, even if it looks like they're making a bad decision for themselves. That's sort of a critical belief system I have. Nobody has the right to interfere with anybody else's destiny, essentially. Okay. So, so I'm really very much a free will guy. And that applies to the electorate, that applies to um, unless it's patently dangerous. So you don't have a right to fire a gun. Okay. All right. But anything short of that, I'm not necessarily libertarian, but I do believe in the people's aggregate right to decide. All right. So that's pretty much where I'm coming from. So this Saturn direct will essentially stop delays, stop pauses. It will allow things to move forward, albeit slowly at first. And the Jupiter retrograde will still make things much more complicated than they should seem. Okay, so this is part and parcel of a Jupiter retrograde. There'll be all these exceptions, all these hoops you have to go through, and all this nonconformity, what I would call nonconformity, uh, or turning around a conventional opinion. Um, Now, again, I have nothing against Jupiter retrograde. It actually makes us more thoughtful, more uh, introspective. I have a Jupiter retrograde in my own chart. I found it's actually helped me to consider actions rather than just following the crowd. And uh, I think one of the things that this Jupiter retrograde does is it's allowing consideration of consequences before it moves forward in December. Now, Saturn over here. So another important thing to come recently is just within days, Venus has moved from Leo into Virgo. Now, this is Venus's fallen sign. It's not well placed in this particular sign. So essentially, you'll see another month of what I would call um, over analysis, over criticism. Okay. Venus is really struggles with what's right and what's wrong. Okay. As a planet. So this is, I think, one of the great misrepresentations in astrology, and that Venus is only connected with luxury. It's not. It's also connected with justice. It's also connected with equity. It's also connected with doing the right thing. So it's in that way, it has a kinship with Jupiter. Jupiter retrograde is casting an aspect on this Venus, and it'll actually help people critically think through what they're trying to do. Okay. So, but Venus in Virgo is also a sign connected very strongly with materialism, with um, caution about economic chance taking, and also a little bit with cheapness. Okay. So, again, if you find people really tough to deal with, financially, that's a Venus retrograde. As a matter of fact, you probably experienced that over the past month or so with Saturn aspecting Venus, Venus going into Virgo, and Venus. Now, this Venus debilitation is canceled without getting too technical with you by its exchange with Mercury in Libra. So essentially, there's a thing called Nishabanga. So it's a cancellation of a debilitation. So Venus is in Mercury sign and Mercury's in Venus sign. Now, this is only for a few days. Mercury's going to go into Scorpio for the next very shortly. and Mars is going to go into Scorpio within about 2 weeks. So by the end of the week, Mercury will be in this sign. So that parsimony or that cheapness or that hypercritical behavior will um, dominate over the next, I would say, 3 to 4 weeks or so. And that's because of Venus being in this sign and also the sun being in Libra. So you'll see a lot of governments essentially frozen in place, trying to placate a lot of different people. So I think what you're going to see overall is a lot of government inaction uh, when they probably should be taking action. Jupiter's aspecting Mercury and Mars right now, so again, there's a strong impulse to correct wrongs, side with the underdog, those kinds of things. And um, I think I think the bad thing about Venus in Virgo is it can lead to economic pessimism. So hopefully Jupiter retrograde will stave that off for about a month or so. But a lot of astrologers have been forecasting, a lot of economists have been forecasting recession for a long time. I think this is kind of the tipping point. So we make it through the next couple of months and nothing triggers badly, we'll be okay. But I have a funny feeling something's going to trigger badly in November. The other thing is Rahu and Ketu, according to the mean nodes, have already shifted into Pisces. If we use the mean node calculation, I use true node. So essentially, the mean node calculation and Ketu with Venus over here will tend to cause some economic discouragement. Also, it can cause some kinds of earth-based disasters, so essentially more proclivity towards natural catastrophes, more proclivity towards things like earthquakes and damage. And certain countries that have, let's say, Virgo in the fourth house will be very vulnerable. Also, if people have, I'm just trying to think of a good way to say it. If people have a lot of pride in what they're doing, Rahu will elevate them, will make them feel like supercharged. But Venus and Ketu will essentially will humble them a bit. It won't be catastrophic, but it will make them back up and be more realistic about what their dreams and goals are. So this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Essentially, every once in a while, we should take a step back and figure out whether or not our goals are good for us or our goals are wise. And this period of soul searching will only last for about a month. But the Venus Ketu conjunction is coming up very, very shortly. And that can cause some relationship problems, even hatred in relationships. And this will come up within about 3 to 4 weeks. So I think, and also be careful about illnesses connected with the liver, the kidneys, because the Venus Ketu conjunction can affect those. In terms of this, the Gati Lagna is with Jupiter, so that will extend economic prosperity to a certain extent. But this Saturn over here, in this chart, we have a Scorpio rising, the sign of Scorpio. And Saturn's in what's called, it's in a corner in the chart. It's in the sign Aquarius. So again, new developments, new technologies, very strongly placed for development of new technologies, of new inventions to help the world, and in a concrete way. So I think, um, but just in general sectors of the industry, kind of a bad time for computers, kind of a bad time for medicine, kind of a bad time for cars. Okay, with Venus debilitated over the next month or so. Over the next week, um, Venus is so. I'm going to delve into politics just a little bit. The Venus K2 conjunction does make the possibility of some kind of a domestic uprising in Israel more likely over the next few weeks. And it will also make K2's passing over this particular sign. It'll also make um, so that may mean a change in leadership. It may mean a change in direction of the country. Um, some people are predicting that Israel will be destroyed. I'm not predicting that at all. But there will definitely be a change in leadership, I think, by the end of the month. So let's go over here and look at your individual. Uh, in terms of the Ukraine, I think the Ukraine is lost. Essentially, I'm not sure um, what can be salvaged from that particular escapade. And this is looking at charts. I'm not showing you the charts right now, but this is looking at the Russian charts. But it will eventually backfire on Russia. But I think, um, and I also think that China is headed for a really economic downslide. Uh, so again, I'm not inherently a pessimist. Um, Jupiter's heading towards its exaltation sign. So even if it's going backwards a bit right now, so it's not necessarily a bad placement, but this Saturn aspect on Jupiter will last for the next 4 months. So that'll essentially screw up judgment and screw up political progress for the next 4 months or so. Okay. In terms of, so that's all I want to say about politics, to be honest with you. And again, I'm gonna say flat out, I could be entirely wrong about Israel. There may be this may indicate Israel gets attacked, you know, but it's more likely a domestic change. Okay, so let's go to your individual charts, your individual signs. So again, these aren't going to change a lot week to week, although for Aries, uh, relationship partners can become really hostile, really difficult, um, and very critical. So this is also, by the way, you're going to see a lot of bellicosity coming out, a lot of really difficult language coming out of the press over the next few weeks. It'll seem like they don't have their heads screwed on straight, and that's really true because what what they're doing right now is with this Mercury Mars conjunction right now is, and with Rahu still influencing and K2 still influencing, um, they're going with what I would call the most um, outside positions they can. Do not trust the press, either side, for the next few months. Okay. Gather what news you can, take it in, uh, but you're really hearing what I would call propaganda points from both sides. Okay. So there are very few outlets I trust right now. I'm not doing this to make anybody paranoid or make anybody turn off their news channels, but you'll go crazy if you pay attention to the news. Okay. Because you'll hear things like, I'm trying to think of good examples. Um, you'll hear out and out lying from both sides or misreporting or corrections. And that's the Mars Mercury K2 conjunction. And it's still in effect. And the truth usually takes a beating if K2 and Venus are together. Okay. Um, Jupiter is more, Jupiter believes in the truth, but is a much more ideological planet than Venus is. Venus is essentially a non-ideological planet. Jupiter believes there is a certain right and a wrong way to do things. Okay. So this isn't knocking Jupiter and praising Venus. It's just that given their relative positions in the chart, Jupiter essentially supports the established order. Okay. Venus supports the rebels. And if Venus is debilitated, number one, the rebels will seem to be they'll be in adherence to the belief system, no matter how weird or bizarre it is. And if Jupiter's in the same company with Rahu or it's retrograde, there'll be a belief in protecting the established order, no matter how weird or screwed up it is, especially with the Saturn aspect on it. So you have to be careful when these planets are afflicted. Okay. And the Mercury Mars conjunction, that's a typical politician combination. And I've seen it shows up in many politicians' charts. It's not at all unusual. And you'll see sudden pronouncements, or this is the end, this person's going down, this person's going. And it's all this quick rush to judgment because of a political ideology, one way or the other. So just be a little careful, be a little bit um, circumspect in what you believe until it actually happens. The moon's in Cancer right now. That's generally considered to be a good placement. The moon's in its own sign, so that's good. Saturn's in its own sign, so that's good. The mutual exchange of Mercury and Venus is actually a good combination, but I think one of the problems is there's a little bit of spaciness or wishful thinking if K2 is in the mix. Okay. So let's get back to the individual chart. So Aries has enemies among partners, and also there's a possibly a relationship partners lying or misrepresenting things to you. I wouldn't take it so seriously. I would view it as a temporary problem, not as a permanent problem. Lasting no more than a month. Okay. Jupiter's retrograde, so there's a certain stubbornness to the sign. Saturn's in the 11th house. There's a lot of focus on financial gains. And Moon is in the 4th house. There's a lot of focus on keeping domestic life solid and stable. The Rahu's in the 12th house, at least approaching the 12th house. So again, heavy expenditure patterns show up. And that's what's been driving a lot of the economy, by the way. So again, be careful about your money. Be careful not to buy things you don't need. Taurus has Moon in the third house. Moon is generally a good planet for Taurus rising, even though it's the third house lord. And essentially, this gives this sign more diplomatic skills, uh, more financial luck because Venus is in the fifth house. It allows this sign to accumulate more financial goods. Um, However, given the fact that Sun is in the fourth house, domestic life will be a little bit disturbed, and the Sun is with Mars and Mercury, so there may be some feelings of ambivalence about domestic life. Feeling a little bit lied to or used for this sign. For this sign, Saturn's in the tenth house, good for career. But again, we have to watch expenditure patterns, especially expenditure patterns from partners. Okay. Partners, as in the case of Aries, partners will seem to be a little bit dishonest, a little bit like enemies. Okay. So again, when I say enemies, this doesn't mean I want you to go out and do something about it. It's essentially it's just kind of a struggle to get to the truth. For Gemini has Moon in the second house. So this is June 15th to July 16th. Moon is in the second house. Um, the Lord of the fifth house, is debilitated. So this will make relationship partners seem a little bit dubious or telling lies or deceitful. Again, Gemini should watch out for friendships, the same as Sagittarius should, because the friends will seem to be giving good advice, but they really won't. Um, and um, for this particular sign, a lot of relationship unhappiness, especially after Mercury goes into this particular sign in about 3 days. So I think one of the things you'll see is that this particular uh, sign has good potential for money, a lot of work connected with career, definitely, but good career advancement, some financial gains finally, but they'll be from things that were left abandoned months ago, and also some triumph in terms of relationship life. Okay, so this doesn't necessarily mean a reconciliation, but you will gain some things from relationship partners you didn't think were possible. For Cancer has Moon in the first house, which is a very good placement. Moon is well placed in that particular sign. Venus is in the third house, but there's not really a strong desire to move forward or to advance. Emotionally, too, you're stuck between hating people and liking people. So that's going to be kind of a problem until really about early next week. And you'll be able to, but again, don't get involved in new relationships. Don't let people take advantage of you because that's a distinct possibility from this particular sign placement. K2's in the fourth house, going into the third. So there's actually a potential to break free, from difficult relationships. But again, according to what I'm seeing from this one, probably not until the end of the month. From this particular chart, Saturn is in the eighth house. That's usually a combination for a person reinventing themselves or figuring out what they really want from life, especially spiritually. So I think this particular combination is going to be really interesting for cancers or people who have moon in Cancer over the next few weeks, or people who have prominent cancers in their chart. So this wouldn't only be people who have a sun in Cancer is July 15th to August 15th, but also people who have um, moon in Cancer, Cancer rising signs, things like that, or are in Cancer Mahadashas. All right, so this is actually kind of interesting because you'll see a lot of shifts in career life for individuals like this. Uh, and I'm just trying to think. So I have a prominent Cancer in my chart, just to give you anecdotal information. So this would have happened around 30 years ago. So around 30 years ago, I was transitioning from one place of work to another. So I think that this usually does give some kind of a transition in employment or a transition in loyalties. And it is a difficult transit. I'll be honest with you. It's not an easy one. So, but again, it does help you grow. It does help you to take chances. It does help you to expand. Okay, and especially in relationship life, I think you'll find new partnerships, new possibilities entering your life. And I'm trying to get rid of the rasp in my voice. I apologize. And um, Jupiter in the ninth house actually helps. I'm sorry, Jupiter in the 10th house actually helps you career wise. For a Leo, Leo has Saturn in the seventh house. So that, again, um, any relationship or any business partnership you get into at this particular time will be very difficult to break off or very difficult to change. Um, and I think that, um, so again, there's caution involved in entering new relationships. Jupiter's still retrograde, so your judgment isn't good, especially in terms of love affairs. So be very cautious in terms of romantic involvements. Venus is in the second house, and so there should be a lot of caution indicated in terms of money. Sun is in the third house, so your confidence is a bit low. So again, it's a little bit of an easy time for the sign to get victimized or to look for outside validation as a way of um, shoring yourself up. Saturn in the seventh house, though, can make it easy to assume positions of leadership. Sorry about the screen popping up. And Jupiter in the ninth house, generally good luck for this sign. Rahu's in the eighth, so you'll find a lot of interest in research in metaphysical or occult subjects if you're so inclined, and also in spiritual activity. Moon's in the 12th, so again, you have to be careful about spending, although Moon in the 12th is generally good for sexual contact. It's generally good for spiritual life. So it has both positives and negatives connected to it. But this Venus down here is a little bit difficult, and it's kind of an unhappy placement, to be honest. So relationship life should be approached with some caution, at least for about another month. Um, and again, I know I've been saying this for several months, but it's literally true. Judgment isn't good, um, and it doesn't mean you can't date or get to know people. That's different. But relationship, uh, the part where you formalize things and make it happen, I probably wouldn't do it. For one, two, three, four. For Virgo, now this is kind of a paradox in Indian astrology because both Mars and Venus are debilitated in signs which are actually good, have planets in, are placed in signs which debilitate them, but also provide luck to them. So so Mars is debilitated in Cancer, Venus is debilitated in Virgo, but this is a wealth-producing combination for Virgo rising. So what does that mean in plain English? Well, there'll be a lot of opportunity to make money and a lot of push to make money over the next month or so. Okay. So this is actually good. Watch out that you don't overextend yourself or that you don't lose yourself or endanger your health in that pursuit. Also, for people with Virgo risings or Virgo suns or Virgo moons, be careful about cars and car accidents over the next month or so. Okay. The other thing, though, is it will produce unusual opportunities for financial advancement. And I think they'll come from unexpected directions. So let's say if you're approached to do something you normally don't do, consider doing it because K2 will present those kinds of unusual opportunities to you. Sun and Mars, again, there's a little bit of a tendency to overexpend on this chart, at least for another 2 weeks or so. And that's because of the Sun ruling the 12th house and being weak. And let's see now. Saturn's in the 6th house. That's normally a good time to overcome enemies through self-discipline and self-regulation. Jupiter's Rahu's in the 7th house. So again, be careful about long-term relationships. People will look better than they actually are. Now, this doesn't mean you won't get attracted to people. Rahu, especially in tandem with Venus, is kind of a magnet for relationships. But just be really, really careful about who you end up getting involved with. Not because they're bad people, but because your eyes will be kind of blurry through the haze. Jupiter and Rahu in the 8th house, almost an obsession with occult or metaphysical subjects. Moon is in the 11th house, so good week for gains, good week for financial gains. For Libra and Aries have been really the most afflicted signs over the past couple of years, really. And that's about to end as K2 changes signs and Venus moves into Libra. So that should give a lot of people some help. And you'll actually see a Venus-Jupiter opposition happening sometime next month. So you'll actually see a lot of financial benefits starting to accrue to the sign in December. And also the sign will become very, very popular in December. For now, though, there's a little bit of a temptation to overspend because of Mercury being in this sign and Mars being in this sign. And there'll be a lot of aggression and impatience and a lot of waiting for financial payoffs. But there is kind of an obsession with money with this sign right now, and confidence will seem a little bit low. People with sun or rising sign or moon in this sign will probably feel like they're being cheated or hurt. It's only a temporary situation, so don't worry about that. Things will get much, much better in December. But for the next week or so, again, be careful about spending, be careful about financial outreach. Saturn's in the 5th house. Very good time for taking on new students or taking on new studies. Saturn's aspecting Jupiter. So relationship life can be hurt a little bit by this combination. Rahu, though, is verging on the 6th house, so it's a good opportunity to overcome enemies and obstacles in life. So this over the next year and a half. Moon is in the 10th house, a lot of focus on career this week for this sign. For Scorpio, Scorpio has Saturn in the fourth house. So again, a good position for increased command leadership. Not particularly good for overcoming enemies or obstacles, but very good for leadership. Um, Moon is what's called a Boudica planet for this particular rising sign. Um, I normally don't pay that much attention to Boudica planets, if I'm honest with you, because I think some of the rules connected with Boudica planets are not don't really play out in real life. But Moon is in the ninth house, so that can mean some difficulty with bosses or some difficulty with supervisors. But you'll also get a lot of chances to improve. Venus is debilitated in the 11th house, so friendships should be watched carefully. And friends could cost you money for this particular rising sign. Long-term relationships will also be a little bit damaged because Venus is in the 11th house in its debilitation sign. So relationship partners may side with friends who will cause you to spend more money and will also interfere with your spiritual growth. So that's something to just keep in mind. Um, there's also something I don't talk a lot about in this particular um, broadcast, but there's also a thing called an Atmakaraka planet. And if people have Atmakaraka planets in any of these signs, those are planets which are highest in degree regardless of sign. Um, these particular predictions hold true for that. Normally, you're not going to get the right Atmakaraka planet if you refer to your Western chart, but usually it's the planet which is so let's say if you have a planet that's, let's say, around 27 to 29 degrees, that's going to be uh, the Amakaraka planet in the chart. And that's really, it's a substitute for the sun or your rising sign lord in the chart. So, so, so essentially anybody who has Amakaraka planets in any of these signs should be careful about that if you know your Vedic chart. Um, the So again, what I'm saying in general is this is a risky chart over the next week or so. Okay, the next, uh, especially over the next uh, month or so. Okay, and regardless of whether or not you use mean or true node, Rahu and Ketu are in transition. Venus is debilitated, and Saturn still aspects Jupiter. So this is like a trifecta of difficulty. Okay, all right. Sagittarius has Jupiter in the fifth house. So some potential luck for this particular sign, although Rahu is still a persistent influence on this particular chart position. Saturn's in the third house. It will give this particular sign a chance to move forward or to take chances. This is what I use. Sagittarius rising is what I use for the U.S. chart. Um, And Sagittarius doesn't have exactly the same meaning it does in Vedic astrology as it does in Western astrology, because the most dangerous nakshatra is located in Sagittarius, and that's Mula nakshatra, located in the first 13 degrees of of Sagittarius. So this Saturn in the third house, though, does give a certain amount of courage to the United States, but it's Saturn's aspecting the rising sign Lord. So there's a certain amount of courage and stupidity connected with this, if I'm being blunt. Um, Moon is in the eighth house, so there's a lot of self-reflection. Venus is in the 10th house. I say there's a lot of bad judgment going on in the United States right now. Okay. A lot of unfairness because of Saturn aspecting Jupiter and Venus debilitated. And again, a lot of lying in order to promote gains or financial growth. Now, again, this won't last forever. Just keep that in mind. But again, love affairs possible, but not really wise. Uh, Long-term relationship partners or allies could be lying to you or could be misrepresenting themselves to you. And career life, you'll feel very unhappy with career life during this particular transit. Now, again, this doesn't mean you should give up your career or you should take something new. It just means, just be patient for about a month and things will improve. Okay. If you want to leave, that's your call. But I wouldn't expect things to be better uh, elsewhere. All right. For Capricorn, we have a big old PL there. That's Pluto in Capricorn. A lot of Western astrologers and some Vedic astrologers view this as like an earth-changing kind of a combination. I don't. Um, but the Lord of the first house and the second house is kind of important for Capricorn because it does change structures. Okay, so essentially, it does give a certain amount of depth to structures. The Aruda for the eighth house is in the sign. And so this will give institutional change. So it's like saying Pluto's there, but Pluto's not there. Okay, so essentially, uh, what I'm trying to say is basically I can employ Pluto or not employ Pluto and get the same results. That's why I don't employ the outer planets. Um, but that's my particular thing. It doesn't have to be yours. Jupiter and Rahu are in the fourth house. Rahu's about to enter the third house, so it will encourage the United States to take, or it will encourage financial institutions to take more risks. But again, I would say stupid risks and also governments to take stupid risks. Moon is in the seventh house, change of alliances. Potentially somewhat good for new alliances, somewhat bad for old alliances because the moon likes change. Venus is in the ninth house. Again, not a good placement for existing governments. And as I said before, we're expecting to see a lot of governmental change between now and April of next year, maybe even into 2024, throughout 2024. Because Saturn's going to stay in this particular sign for the next until 2025. Okay. Um, and let's see now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Venus. So again, so bad decisions in government, bad decisions in business, some theft indicated in business, some dishonesty indicated because of this cluster in Libra. So again, for this sign, be careful about business partnerships. Be very, very careful about business partnerships. For Aquarius, Saturn's in the first house, Jupiter's in the third. So again, a lot of leadership potential with the sign, a lot of emphasis on new technologies. Jupiter in the third, uh, not really a risk-taking combination. Moon is in the sixth, a lot of change of enemies and allies. Venus is in the eighth, a lot of interest in research, but you'll come to erroneous conclusions. And luck will be a little bit twisted or thwarted by this combination in the ninth house as Lord of the 10th house. The eighth, ninth, and 10th house are all interconnected in this chart. And so is the 11th house of gains. So some gains, but with a lot of difficulty. Finally, last but not least, we're in Pisces. Pisces has Jupiter in the first house, may have Rahu in the first house as well. Jupiter's in the second house, excuse me. So some potential for wealth for the sign, some potential for increased luck with children. Relationship partners will be a little bit materialistic and a little bit deceitful, so be careful about that. And finally, Saturn in the 12th house, be careful of spending. Now let's look at the overall map of the world and see where problems are or where good things are. And I don't have a lot of time left, so I apologize. All right. Uh, let's go up here. And we have, so what do we have here? So moon really isn't afflicted in this chart, but there is a moon Rahu line in northwestern, and there's a Venus line in Hawaii. I think Venus in Hawaii, there are going to be more financial scandals in Hawaii, more land scandals in Hawaii. Rahu and Jupiter in Vancouver, and Rahu and the Moon and the West Coast. Possibly more earthquake damage, but possibly more flooding as well. We see all these Jupiter lines, all these Sun, Jupiter, Mars, Mercury lines. So there'll be a lot of misrepresentation coming out of both Mexico, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and even as far as stretching as California. There's a Saturn line running straight through the middle of the United States up by North and South Dakota, all the way down through Texas. So there'll be some financial struggles in that part of the world. Venus is in Virgo, pretty much next to New England and through Haiti and the Dominican Republic and all the way down through um, Chile and Peru. So we can expect to see some economic hardships in that part of the world. Rahu's in Brazil, passing close to Paraguay. And I think what you're going to see is political scandals coming out of that part of the world, especially due to the moon line intersecting. Um, we have Sun, Mars, Mercury lines running through Iceland, and so political scandal running through Great Britain. But let's talk about Iceland. So maybe some volcanoes, maybe some earthquake activity in Iceland, and possibly down through the Azores. Although I hope not. Uh, Moon passing through Europe and Saturn passing through Europe, France, uh, Algeria, next to Morocco, um, and down through Ghana. Kind of indicates a lot of turmoil in Western Africa and Western Europe. That's not a surprise. That's been happening pretty much consistently over the past few weeks. There's a Venus line, so some economic threat or damage happening in Eastern Europe. We have a Rahu line, so some scandals coming out of Saudi Arabia, Israel, and West and Eastern Africa. Some disruption happening in Iran, maybe increased militarism in Iran, but also some lying and some misrepresentation coming from that part of the world. Finally, we have a Saturn line passing through India, so that indicates economic decline in that part of India, in eastern India, and also in China and throughout uh, Ladakh and Bangladesh. And the next line we encounter is a Venus line running through China. So again, not economic good news for China, Vietnam, and Indonesia. And finally, we see these Rahu moon lines running through Japan and Australia, and a Jupiter line running through uh, Australia as well. So it indicates some problems to these governments, some economic declines to these governments. And finally, through New Zealand, we see a moon line running through New Zealand, and that indicates some political scandal too. So that's it for this week. I love you all. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye, everyone.